Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 on Monday, July 23rd, 2018. I am Dave Biddle, very happy to be joined by Alex Gleitman. We're actually recording this show Sunday night because I will be on a plane to Chicago while a lot of you are listening to the show Monday morning for Big Ten Media Days. Alex, it is the unofficial or official start of Big Ten football season, however you want to look at it. All of Ohio State's media obligations are tomorrow, Tuesday. The Big Ten West will go today, Monday, and the Big Ten East will go on Tuesday. In fact, I'm not even sure if they do it quite like that. They might mix and match a little bit. But what you need to know is Ohio State's day is on Tuesday. Alex, from Ohio State's perspective, and you can name many things if you'd like to, what are you most interested in hearing about when Urban Meyer takes the mic, and then the three player reps with Isaiah Prince and Paris Campbell and Draymond Jones?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the two biggest things I'm looking forward to are my two biggest concerns for Ohio State heading into the season. I think a lot of people have questions about the quarterback situation. Obviously, with Joe Burrow transferring to LSU, that kind of sorted itself out a little bit. There's still some talk about how good Dwayne Haskins will be and whatnot. But for me, replacing a guy at left tackle in Jamarco Jones and a center in Billy Price, that's going to be harder to do than replacing J.T. Barrett, in my opinion. And then on the defensive side of the football, Ohio State with Tuff Borland out is pretty much replacing all three starting linebackers from last season. So who are the guys that are going to fill that role? I think their play could very well determine how good the defense is. And then on top of that, on the offensive side of the ball, I think Dwayne Haskins, we don't know what we're going to get from him. Obviously, the arm strength is there. The talent is there. The natural ability. It seems like he's got the swagger and leadership that you want in your quarterback. But if no one's blocking him, it's not going to matter how good his arm is. So that's what I'm curious to see, and I think it's going to be interesting to see just how Urban Meyer answers those questions, because coming out of spring we kind of had an idea of how some things might shake out, but I get the feeling some things probably are changing heading into fall camp in a couple weeks.
How forthcoming do you think Urban will be about injuries? Guys like Brandon Bowen, even Dante Booker, because there's been a lot of stuff up in the air about that. Tuff Borland, of course, as you mentioned. And what do you expect him to say about those guys, if you had to guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think he'll be as straightforward as we can hope for. I think with Brandon Bowen, I think Brandon's probably going to be ready for the season for fall camp. So I'm going to guess he'll probably say he's probable. I think when it comes to someone like Tuff Borland, they'll probably be a little bit more vague and say, we're hoping that he'll come back at some point. We're bringing him along slowly, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I don't think he's going to give you the details exactly of everything you hope for. Coaches never do, especially Urban Meyer. But at the same time, I think you're going to get a general idea of the health of the football team, what issues they're dealing with, who's a little nicked up, who's more seriously injured, when we can expect those guys back as far as the general timetable, heading into fall camp.
I'm sure he'll be asked about the Zack Smith situation. It looked like, at first everybody wanted to burn Zack Smith like on the stake, and then everybody realized, maybe, he didn't really do that much wrong. Who knows about like the intricacies with, the divorce and everything. That's always messy, especially when there's kids involved. But I'm sure Urban's going to be asked about the Zack Smith situation. I'm sure he'll deflect, but that's probably, unfortunately from my perspective, because I'd like to get down to nuts and bolts about team personnel and everything. I bet there's going to be a lot of questions asked about Zack Smith. I think there'll probably be more questions asked about Dwayne Haskins and things like that, but I bet Urban's going to be asked a lot about Zack Smith.
Yeah, I would expect it. It's new. If this happened maybe like a month and a half ago, I don't think that Zack Smith would really come up at Big Ten Media Days, but because it's so new, I'm sure there will be a question thrown his way, and as you said, I'm sure he's going to deflect it and, say something along the lines of, we're letting the legal process take its course. I'm aware of the situation. I've spoken to Zach. We think it's some sort of misunderstanding, but again, we don't want to comment on that until the court process plays out. So I'm sure you'll get some sort of answer like that where they're not really at liberty to talk that much about it. But, that is something, again, I'm with you, Dave. I'd rather talk about what's going to happen with the team on the field in a few weeks when they put on the pads for fall camp. But at the same time, I mean, there is a scenario. I mean, I'm not expecting this to happen, but there's a scenario where, depending on how things play out, where this could impact the Ohio State upcoming season and the coaching staff and things of that nature. So it is something to keep an eye on. It's definitely a storyline that we'll be talking about in Chicago.
Switching gears, I want to look around the league. Again, like I said, it's not – I misspoke earlier. It's not just West on Monday and East on Tuesday. They do mix and match, but for the Ohio State fans out there, which is pretty much everybody listening to the show, what the listeners need to know is all of Ohio State's obligations are Tuesday, but did want to clear that up. Let's break it up for this show, West and East, and talk about around the league. I actually want to start out West. We talk a lot about the East, and rightfully so. You got the 4 big dogs in the East. Phil Steele has 5 Big Ten teams ranked in the top 13, and 4 of them are from the Big Ten East, with Ohio State at number 3, Michigan at 11, Penn State at 12, Michigan State 13. He also has Wisconsin number 6, and Wisconsin looks good, man. I mean, we know they're good every year, but they might be even better than usual this year. A lot's going to depend on if Hornibrook can become like at least a kind of above average quarterback, maybe even good. He's never going to be great because they got their entire offensive line back, and those guys average like 500 pounds each. Slight exaggeration. Jonathan Taylor is going to be better as a sophomore. Wisconsin looks really good to me. I still think Ohio State's going to win the Big Ten, but this is probably one of the better Wisconsin teams I can remember.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think Wisconsin's going to be Wisconsin. I mean, I think they are who they are. Do they have a little bit, more experience? They're more loaded toward the junior and seniors on their team? Absolutely. We've seen really good Wisconsin teams like in 2010 that went to the Rose Bowl and played TCU. We have a couple other good Wisconsin teams that we've seen throughout the year. Actually, I'm not sure if 2010 was the year. It might have been the year that they went to the Rose Bowl. I know that's the year that they beat Ohio State, and when Ohio State was number 1 and they went to Madison. But
2010, the year that didn't count. Yeah, 2010.
Yep. J.J. Watt that never happened. No, we've seen really good Wisconsin teams like that team and other teams. I mean, at the end of the day, they're going to be built with a great offensive line, a strong running game, an effective passing game built off play action, and a quarterback that doesn't turn the football over, and a stout defense that's something you think of more traditional Big Ten type of style of defense. Hard-nosed, good up front, really good against the run, efficient, kind of bend, don't break against the pass, not letting up too many big plays. So I expect them to once again have a lot of success, win the Big Ten West. But I think, when they get to that Big Ten championship game, are they good enough to beat the Big Ten East? And the answer is they're probably a better team than last year, but I just still don't know if they have the athletes on both sides of the ball to compete with, the athletes that are on Ohio State's roster or Penn State's roster or potentially, Michigan State or Michigan's roster, depending on who gets to Indianapolis this year. So I guess I'm high on Wisconsin, but I expect them to kind of bring what they're going to bring this year almost every single year, and I expect them to get to Indianapolis at least until like the Nebraskas, Purdue's, whoever else may catch up to them. But I expect them to get there, but I don't know if they have enough to beat the Big Ten East. So I'm definitely curious to see kind of how their season unfolds.
Yeah, their lack of speed is always going to be a concern. And then, again, Hornibrook has to improve. He can't be what he was last year. Just looking around the rest of the West, I mean, Scott Frost taking over at Nebraska, I think that's a great hire. Purdue at year 2 of the Jeff Brom era, I think that was obviously a Grand Slam home run hire. They could be a sneaky good team this year. Northwestern, I think, will be good. Iowa will be solid with Nate Stanley coming back as a junior. Year 2 of P.J. Fleck at Minnesota. Just anything else that stands out other than Wisconsin about the Big Ten West?
No, I mean, I think Northwestern will be sneaky good. They always find a way to win more games than they probably should. They have a really good quarterback in Clayton Thorson coming back. I think they're one to watch. I don't think Iowa's going to be that much, but as Ohio State knows, they're certainly capable of beating anyone in Kinnick. I think actually my kind of surprise team, and this is kind of my trap game for Ohio State, is Purdue. I think, with Jeff Brom there in year 2, that program has a lot of confidence around it. I think that their aerial attack could be hard to shut down. I think Ohio State has had trouble in West Lafayette in the past. And even in games that they've won, some of them have been closer than they would have liked. And I think that's a game that could surprise Ohio State this year. And I think Purdue's a team that can surprise a lot of people in the Big Ten and potentially be kind of a dark horse for me in the Big Ten West. I also like what Scott Frost, that hire at Nebraska. I think that's a great hire. I don't think in year 1 he's going to fully have everything rolling the way he wants it to, but I do think that in year 2 he's going to be competing for the Big Ten West. So they're going to be a team that I think is going to get much better throughout the course of the season, and I think that, they're going to potentially beat some teams that maybe they shouldn't be beating.
Okay, that was a great hire for Nebraska, great for the Big Ten. We need a healthy Nebraska. They're never going to be, people have asked, are they going to be what they used to be? They're never going to be a team that wins 3 national championships in a decade like they did in the 90s, but they can be a lot better than what they've been, and I think Scott Frost was a home run hire, and he's just, as you mentioned, I don't expect a lot of them in year one, but they're going to be kind of sneaky good, maybe have a couple upsets, but watch out, like about, 2-3 years into his tenure, I bet he'll have that thing rolling pretty good. He's already recruiting pretty well. All right, let's focus on the Big Ten varsity, the Big Ten East, although the West is getting better. I should probably stop calling the West the JV, but not quite yet. Big Ten East, let's start with Michigan. Shea Patterson taking over at quarterback. I know Harbaugh hasn't said that for sure. I'm sure he's going to act like, like Nick Saban's acting like he's got a quarterback controversy or something. What do you expect out of Shea Patterson, and just anything else that stands out about Michigan?
I think Michigan's going to be a really good football team. My concern, if I'm a Michigan fan, is on the offensive line, particularly at both the left tackle and right tackle spot. I'm looking at their personnel, and I see the interior. I think it's going to be a pretty solid interior, the center and 2 guards. But I just don't see who is taking over at offensive tackle that really, at least especially early in the year, they have some tough matchups. I think that's going to be a weakness for them all year. I think they lack explosive playmakers, at least an extensive number of them. I think Donovan Peoples-Jones can be good. I actually like their running backs. I think, they have a few guys that are pretty solid players, and I think Shea Patterson's going to be able to make some plays. I really think he's going to be a good player, but it's just, again, the same thing I said about Dwayne Haskins before. If nobody can block for him, and guys like Nick Bosa and Chase Young have their way of just getting around to end and putting pressure on him, it's going to be harder for him to do his job. So I expect Michigan to have a really good defense. I expect them, to be, I think, definitely better than they were last year. I expect them to be a legitimate contender for the Big Ten. I think a lot is going to depend on their offensive line. I think both Ohio State and Michigan, a lot is going to depend on their offensive lines.
Penn State lost a lot of starters on defense. They got a lot of, that's a question mark, but I love Trace McSorley as a college quarterback. I think he's a great college quarterback. Will he be an NFL quarterback? Probably not. Maybe he can make a team, but I don't think he's ever going to be a starting quarterback in the NFL, but I think he's a really good, I called him great. He's at least really good, borderline great college quarterback. But last couple years, Joe Moorhead got a lot of credit. We kept hearing it. You got to give a lot of credit to Joe Moorhead. Look at the job that Joe Moorhead is doing as offensive coordinator. So now that Joe Moorhead's the head coach at Mississippi State, I really don't know, to be honest, I don't know that much about Penn State's new offensive coordinator, but I have to imagine losing Joe Moorhead, while maybe not the same blow as losing Tom Herman and replacing him with Ed Warner and Tim Beck. Sorry, Bucknutters, I just gave you guys all a heart attack reminding you about that. How much of a loss do you think Joe Moorhead is? How much will that affect Penn State? Just what else stands out about the Nittany Lions to you heading into this season?
Yeah, for me, a lot of people have been talking about Saquon Barkley and Mike Gesicki being gone from that offense. But for me, I'm a guy who I think Joe Moorhead's the reason that team kind of became what they were 2 years ago in 2016. And after that point, I said before last season, whenever Joe Moorhead leaves, I think that's when you're going to see how good of a coach James Franklin is, because I think that I think Moorhead was a big reason that offense was able to click the way it has been clicking the last couple of at least year and a half. And I think my initial thoughts are that Penn State is going to take a step back this year. I could see them being something like 9-3, which is still a solid year, but not maybe what they expect or what they're hoping for in Happy Valley. But I think they're going to struggle to obviously replace some key players, but I think more so, I think Joe Moorhead is going to serve to be really important. And that's no knock on Ricky Rain. I just think Joe Moorhead is that great of an offensive coach. He's a guy who was a head coach at Fordham and kind of took a step back in title, if you will, to be the offensive coordinator at Penn State. He's a really good football coach, and I think that's going to hurt him a little bit, especially early on in the year.
Michigan State, a lot of returning starters, especially at key positions like quarterback. Brian Lewerke is good. He had his worst game of the year against Ohio State last year, but Ohio State was fired up after losing to Iowa, and they just blew the doors off Michigan State. But Lewerke overall is a good quarterback. He's now entering his fourth-year junior season. They got L.J. Scott back. They got a lot of returning starters back on both sides of the ball. Like I said, Phil Steele has them ranked 13th in the country, right there with Michigan and Penn State. So what do you expect out of Sparty this year, Alex?
Yeah, I've wrote this the last couple of weeks. They're my dark horse in the Big Ten East, and I know they're not much of a dark horse because they've been there at least in the last handful of years. But I think when people talk about the Big Ten East, they mention Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State often, and I think a lot of people kind of forget about Michigan State, and they're my team that I think they could be the biggest threat to Ohio State in the Big Ten East. I think the schedule is favorable for them. They do have to go to Penn State, but they get both Ohio State and Michigan at home this year. I think that's absolutely huge. I think, as you said, Brian Lewerke is now kind of a veteran. He knows what he's doing. Mark D'Antonio is always going to put on a good defense. Of course, Ohio State curb stomped them last year. I think, if anything, that makes the game that much harder for Ohio State this year up in East Lansing. So, I think that Michigan State's going to be a really good football team. I think they have some really talented players, and they're my pick to either come in first or second in the Big Ten East. Right now, I have Ohio State and Michigan State as my 1 and 2 in the Big Ten East, but it's really kind of wide open in the sense that I think any of the 4 teams we just talked about can win the division and then win the conference and go to the playoff potentially.
Before I let you go, could Maryland be somewhat of a sleeper this year? Not to win. They're not going to win the Big Ten East, but could Maryland maybe be better than people think? Because Durkin's been recruiting really well.
Yeah, maybe. I think they're maybe another year off from that. I think I don't know if their defense is there yet. I think the talent, as you said, he's been recruiting well, but those guys are maybe sophomores at the oldest. And I think, maybe they steal a game that they shouldn't have, but I think the 2019 season will actually be the season where you start to see things turn a little bit more so as far as Maryland goes into making them what DJ Durkin has been building the last few years.
Great stuff from Alex Gleitman. Really appreciate it, Alex. Extended version here of the Five-ish. Thanks to all the listeners out there for tuning into the show. Make sure you catch our coverage on Bucknuts. Even though Ohio State doesn't go on Monday, we'll still have coverage about the other teams and what they say about Ohio State. And we will have wall-to-wall coverage all day Tuesday. Steve Hellwagon and I both in Chicago. Thanks again to Alex. Thanks to the listeners. I appreciate it. Hope everybody has a great day. Let's hear that Buckeye swag, best damn band in the land.